first arrived in this city, the streets felt unfamiliar, like a maze designed to unsettle me. Starting over wasn't a choice. It was a necessity. I told myself that leaving everything behind would free me from the shadows of my past. But the truth was murkier. Every new day brought its own set of challenges, each one a reminder of how far I'd fallen from the life I had envisioned. I threw myself into work, hoping the long hours would fill the void, but even the sharpest distractions couldn't entirely silence the echoes of what I'd lost. For months, I stuck to a strict routine: work, gym, and home. Social events were rare, mostly invitations I couldn't refuse without raising questions. When I joined my current team, it was Helen who broke through my armor first, coaxing me into joining their weekly Friday outings. "It'll be good for you," she had insisted, her tone both gentle and persistent. I doubted her words, but I went anyway. The first few times I sat on the periphery, sipping my drink and offering only polite smiles. Gradually, though, I found myself engaging, even laughing occasionally. It wasn't the same as the life I'd left behind, but it was something. The bar's lively chatter was abruptly halted by a loud crash. Everyone at our table froze, turning to see what had caused the disturbance. A man's voice cut through the air, filled with desperation. "Sweetheart, it's not how it seems. Please, this is all a mistake." His pleas were ignored. Seconds later, a dull grunt was followed by the heavy thump of a body hitting the ground. A woman's voice, laced with fury, rose above the murmuring crowd. "You're unbelievable. If you ever dare to contact me again, you'll be facing my dad's tool. This is the last time you'll hear from me." The door to the bar swung open as a small framed figure stormed out into the night. Back where the commotion had begun, another woman helped the man to his feet, only to slap him hard enough to send him reeling into a nearby chair. "Idiot!" she hissed, before turning and marching toward the exit herself. I turned back to my drink, uninterested in the unfolding drama. However, Michael leaned forward, addressing our group of colleagues gathered for our usual Friday night outing. "Why do people do that?" he asked, more curious than critical. I stayed quiet, but Helen, seated across from him, tilted her head slightly. "Do what exactly?" she inquired. Michael smirked. "Why is it that when someone gets caught cheating, their first response is always, 'It's not what it looks like'? How can they possibly know what their partner thinks?" I exhaled heavily and tried to shift my focus elsewhere. His words had unearthed memories of the last encounter I had with my ex-wife, Janelle, and I found myself wondering about what might have transpired in the 15 months since I walked out, her voice echoing those exact words as I left. "Ryan, hello? Are you even listening?" Holly's voice broke my thoughts as she pinched my arm to bring me back to the present. I blinked and realized that everyone at the table was now staring at me. "What?" I asked, trying to mask my unease as I toyed with my glass. "You totally zoned out," Ethan pointed out. "What's on your mind?" Looking at their expectant faces, I sighed. I knew these colleagues well enough to understand they wouldn't accept a vague response. So, after taking a deep breath, I admitted, "I was just remembering a time in my life when someone said that exact line to me." The conversation at the table fell silent. I'd been with the East Regional Marketing Division for about 15 months, and both Helen and Michael likely remembered the withdrawn, hostile person I was when I first arrived. Helen, piecing things together, leaned over and whispered, "So you married a cheater?" "Yes," I growled. "And yes, she actually tried to spin that line on me." Holly looked up, her eyes filled with sadness. "But you did talk to her afterward, right?" I scoffed. "Talk? Maybe if there'd been a warning, late nights out, or some excuse about girls' night that might have made me suspicious. But no, I walked in on the worst-case scenario, came home early from work with a migraine and found a trail of clothes leading to the bedroom. And there was Janelle, in nothing but a garter belt and stockings, with some guy's face between her legs." Ethan winced. "That's rough, but surely you've spoken to her since." I let out a bitter laugh. When I walked out, she was still yelling about it not being what I thought. The next day, I sneaked in, grabbed my essentials, and left. Vigo had been trying to get me to take this transfer for months, so I said yes, on the condition I could leave immediately. Michael clapped me on the back. "Well, tonight's the night to let loose. Everyone knows you're practically a hermit. Time to live a little." I shrugged. "I enjoy the occasional quiet night out with company, but dating's not for me right now. I always believed marriage was a lifelong commitment." "So what? You're saying it's broken beyond repair?" Ethan teased with a smirk. Before I could respond, Holly grabbed my hands and pulled me onto the dance floor. I tried to resist, but a slow song began, and she pressed against me, melting into my arms. I couldn't help but hold her. When the song ended, I released her, planning to make an exit, but she wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me. "Drive me home?" she asked, her blue eyes locking onto mine. I hesitated, but eventually nodded, unable to say no. She cheered, grabbed her purse, and linked her arm with mine. As we navigated the crowd, I muttered, "Why me? And what about your car?" Holly laughed. "I carpool with Helen on nights like this. She drives me to work and I take her home. Besides, Helen loves stepping out to the parking lot during the night. I, however, don't follow her lead." I stumbled at her comment. "Helen? Married Helen?" "Yep. Happily married. Helen sneaks off with at least 2 guys whenever we're at the bar," she said lightly. "But don't worry, I don't take notes from her." When we reached my car, I hesitated, studying Holly. Beneath her blonde, beachy exterior and striking beauty was a sharp, ambitious woman who had climbed to senior accountant within a year at the company. Her cheerleader past and modeling offers belied the disciplined professional she truly was. Despite the occasional flirtatious vibe, Holly had surprised everyone by openly admitting she wasn't interested in casual relationships. She was waiting for the right person. I opened the door for her, and she slid in with a soft giggle, unlocking my side from within. As I climbed into the driver's seat, she flashed a warm smile. "Still a gentleman," she remarked, slipping off her jacket and unbuttoning the top of her blouse. For a moment, the glimpse of her bra disrupted my focus. Shaking it off, I started the car. "It's just habit," I muttered. "Besides, you deserve to be treated well." Her expression softened. "I'm sorry for mentioning Helen earlier. Please don't tell her I said anything." "Don't worry," I said. "Helen's choices are her problem. As long as she knows what's at risk with Dean, it's not my concern." After a brief pause, she asked, "So you're not divorced?" "Why bother? Lawyers, arguments? None of it is worth it. I'd rather stay out of sight than reopen that chapter of my life." Holly seemed momentarily saddened, but quickly shifted the conversation to lighter topics, like the upcoming company summer party. She insisted I partner with her for the couple's events, and before I knew it, I'd reluctantly agreed. When we arrived at her apartment complex, I opened her door and she stepped out, kissing me lightly on the cheek. "Want to come up?" she asked with a playful smile. "Holly," I said firmly, "you've said you want someone special. That's not me." She laughed softly. "You don't know what I want." Before I could respond, she let her skirt fall to the ground, revealing lacy white underwear. "I'm seducing the man I want to marry," she said, her tone matter of fact. "Husband?" I repeated, startled. "I'm still married. And don't you think this is moving a little fast?" Her eyes sparkled with determination. "Not for me." Grabbing my hand, she continued. "Ryan, I've heard nothing but respect for you from the women at work. We share the same values, and as for your marriage, that's just a formality." I pulled my hand away, stepping back in disbelief. Holly smirked, pulling her skirt back into place. "You want this more than you'll admit," she teased. "Eventually, you'll beg for it." Shaking my head, I replied, "I don't cheat, I don't lie, and I'm not playing games. I've been down that road before." She didn't waver. "You're a good man, Ryan. Honest, loyal, and real. That's why I'm not giving up on you." I sighed in frustration. "I've had enough of heartbreak. Never again." Holly grinned as she shut the car door. "And it won't happen again. I've waited for someone like you, someone who values loyalty and commitment. You're what I want for the rest of my life." Unable to take any more, I got into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and started the engine. Holly didn't argue or try to stop me. She simply walked toward her apartment, her laughter trailing behind her. At home, I poured a stiff drink and tried to push the encounter from my mind. Sleep didn't come easily. My dreams blurred memories of Janelle's betrayal with Holly's bold advances, leaving me feeling drained by morning. The weekend offered little solace. A migraine kept me in bed most of Saturday. By the afternoon, I forced myself out for a hike, hoping fresh air would clear my head. Sunday was more productive, though Holly's audacity lingered in my thoughts. During errands, I noticed an old sedan tailing me. It parked at a distance in each lot, its driver, a nondescript older man, keeping me in view. By the time I reached my apartment, the car had turned off, but unease gnawed at me. Monday brought its own set of challenges. Michael and Ethan awkwardly apologized for their antics the previous Friday. I brushed it off, burying myself in quarterly reports. Just before lunch, Helen appeared at my office, visibly anxious. She closed the door and hesitated before speaking. "Holly told you about what I've been doing in the parking lot, didn't she?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. I sighed. "Helen, what I think doesn't matter. The only opinion that should concern you is Dean's." Tears welled in her eyes. But I love Dean, she said. He's the best I've ever had. I can't stop. I held back sharp words and replied calmly, it's not about how you feel. It's about what happens when Dean finds out. That's the reality you're facing. Helen left, deep in thought, just as Holly breezed into the room. Before I could react, she plopped onto my lap and looped her arms around my neck. What are you doing? I growled. Kissing my fiancé, she teased, pecking my cheek. Now let's tackle the budget. I glared at her. Holly, I'm still married. You deserve better. She smirked. You'd file for divorce if I asked. Your words say no, but your actions, they say otherwise. Enough, I said, exasperated. Where's the subtlety, the teasing? If I wasn't pinned here, I'd already be out the door. Holly leaned closer, her tone soft but confident. You claim you don't want me, but you haven't pushed me away. Maybe deep down you're already thinking about the life we could have together. Holly flashed a mischievous grin as I nudged her off my lap, struggling to steady my thoughts. She already sensed the truth I fought to hide, how much I was drawn to her. Her attention baffled me. I couldn't fathom why someone like her would be interested in someone as broken as I felt. But the memory of Janelle's betrayal kept me grounded. I steered the conversation back to work, maintaining professionalism until Holly finally left. On her way out, she shot me a teasing smirk and adjusted her skirt just enough to reveal the tops of her stockings. The glance she tossed over her shoulder dared me to follow. I stayed rooted in place, gripping my desk until she disappeared. The afternoon dragged on as I worked on quarterly reports. A big meeting loomed, and I had to finalize updates for Lawrence Fellows, the VP of Marketing, by Thursday. Most of the work involved tweaking charts, but I delved into the raw data to preempt any questions. One product aimed at teenage boys was underperforming due to a poor marketing strategy. While fixes were underway, ensuring the presentation was airtight added pressure. At 4:30, my secretary, Sally, popped in to inform me, Detective Smith from the police department is here to see you. Confused, I nodded. Send him in. A large man in plain clothes entered, flashing his badge. Ryan Bennett, you lived in Maple Grove, California 2 years ago? Cautiously, I nodded. What's this about? He chuckled. There's a missing person report filed for you. It says you walked out of your apartment and never came back. I let out a bitter laugh. I went back the next day, grabbed my things, and left for good. He raised a brow. So, you're the Ryan Bennett in the report? I gestured around my office. I'm hardly missing. I'm right here. His gaze lingered on my desk, taking in my sparse decorations and a few photos. High school graduation, a college softball team, and a fishing trip with Ethan. None included women. Got it. I'll update the report, but someone from Maple Grove might still reach out. Shrugging, I replied. I came here to start over, and I did. After he left, I finished up and headed to the parking lot. Mostly empty, except for Holly perched on the hood of my car. She hopped down as I approached. Ready to give in yet? She teased, her grin full of mischief. Not happening, I shot back, trying to sidestep her. She blocked me, pressing me against the car door. You'll crack eventually, she murmured, leaning in. I managed to open the door, but not before noticing her unbuttoned blouse. Holly, this is a parking lot. Anyone could see you. She giggled, fastening her buttons with agonizing slowness. The right person already has. Shaking my head, I muttered, You're far too good at this to be inexperienced. Laughing, she replied, Cheerleading and slumber parties teach you plenty. I might lack practice, but I've mastered the theory. I couldn't help but chuckle, but my tone turned serious. This changes nothing. I'm still married. She looped her arms around my neck and whispered, Not for long. Before skipping off, she tossed a package onto my car seat. Inside was a set of lace lingerie. Blushing, I pushed intrusive thoughts aside and drove home. That evening, I painted to clear my head, but a call interrupted me. The line went dead as soon as I answered, the caller ID showing a Maple Grove area code. I dismissed it and returned to my work. The next day was a whirlwind. Lawrence called me in to discuss the product's lackluster performance, particularly sensitive since his son had been involved. He accepted responsibility and asked me to expedite a revised strategy. Meetings and budgets ate up the rest of the day. Holly stopped by briefly to invite me to lunch. Busy on a call, I declined. She left a sealed envelope on my desk. Opening it later, I found a photo of her in a bikini from a university cheerleader calendar and a note. See the rest, my place, Friday at 11:30. Flustered, I began crafting excuses to avoid her that night. Driving home, I noticed a sedan tailing me. It turned off a block before my apartment, leaving me unsettled. While grilling dinner, a knock on my door startled me. I opened it to find Janelle, my estranged wife. Her hesitation matched my shock. Finally, she said, "It's not what you think." I laughed coldly. "You don't know what I think." She followed me to the kitchen, pleading, "Ryan, I never meant to hurt you." "Sleeping with someone else was your way of showing love?" I shot back. Tears welled in her eyes. "I want us to start over." Funny, since Vigo always knew where I was. She flushed. "HR told me you left. I didn't know how to find you." "Google exists, Janelle." Her voice cracked as she admitted. "It took a year, but I won a harassment case against Steve. The settlement helped me find you." Scoffing, I replied, "Too late. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." Her sobs filled the room as I ignored her, eating my now cold steak. Later, I called my lawyer and scheduled an appointment. Before bed, I locked my door. In the morning, I found her still asleep on the couch. When she woke, she begged, "Give me another chance. It was a mistake." I shook my head. "We need to divorce first. After 15 months apart, trust isn't something I can rebuild overnight." Defeated, she nodded. "Lynn said you'd want that." "Who's Lynn?" "My counselor. She said divorce might be the first step to rebuilding trust." Her honesty felt genuine, but it only confirmed what I already knew. Our marriage was beyond repair. Her mix of sadness and determination was disarming, but I stayed firm. After breakfast, we drove separately to the lawyer's office, where Jake Donovan handled the process efficiently. We signed agreements. I wouldn't claim any part of her harassment settlement, and she waived back alimony, acknowledging the monthly $600 I had continued depositing in our joint account. She blushed when Jake asked why she hadn't used that to track me down, admitting she hadn't thought of it. She provided records from her lawsuit, showing she'd left her job and sued her employer. Jake recorded both of us affirming the divorce, with his secretary notarizing everything. The process would fast-track the finalization to 30 days. The only pause came when Jake asked Janelle if she wanted the divorce. She hesitated, then said, "I wish I hadn't hurt Ryan. I want to stay together, but I've been advised that this divorce is necessary if we're ever to rebuild trust." So yes, in legal terms, I agree. The secretary stifled a snort but said nothing. 4 hours later, the paperwork was done. Jake promised to mail my copies to my apartment and offered Janelle the option of picking hers up once she was settled. Outside, as we reached our cars, Janelle hesitated. "Thank you, Ryan." "For what?" I asked, puzzled. "For being honorable. You could have shut me out completely, but you didn't. Lynn warned me I might never win you back, but at least now I have a little hope." I nodded and got into my car, watching her through the rearview mirror as I drove away. The memories of our 7 good years tugged at me, but the lingering question of trust kept my heart closed. At work, the team was in high spirits. The quarterly report had been delivered on time, and the revised marketing plan was coming together. Meetings consumed the rest of my day and filled my schedule for the week. Holly's attempts to catch me were thwarted by the flurry of activity, though her gaze lingered during meetings. On Friday, she knocked on my office door just before the day ended. "Ryan, a group's heading to Charlie's tonight. Can you drive me?" Her pleading expression made refusal impossible. I sighed and agreed. Holly responded with a tight hug, pulling me to the elevator. I managed to keep her at arm's length during the ride, but her hand found mine. Against my better judgment, I gave it a squeeze. As we drove to Charlie's, Holly turned to me. "So why were you out Wednesday morning?" "It was personal," I said, keeping my tone light. "Nothing for you to worry about." She frowned, but quickly shifted gears, sliding her skirt up to reveal the tops of her stockings. "Should I leave this on for tonight at my place?" she teased. "Holly, are you—" I started. "Trying to get you into my bed?" she interrupted with a sly smile. "Yes, and I plan on making sure you never want to leave it." I shook my head as we pulled into the parking lot. "You're rushing this. We've known each other only 7 months. Slow down and think this through." She giggled, unbothered. "I've thought about it plenty. I'm getting the man I respect and trust most into my bed. You'll be my husband, my love, the father of my children, and my lord in all things intimate." Her confidence was unshakable, leaving me more conflicted than ever. I parked the car and followed Holly into the bar, where the usual work crowd had claimed a table. I slid into a seat between Ethan and Michael, ignoring Holly's knowing smirk as she joined Helen and leaned over to whisper something. After ordering drinks, I noticed Holly's beer was delivered unopened, and she casually popped the top with a bottle opener from her purse. Meanwhile, I sipped my draft, while Ethan and Michael debated the upcoming football season. Ethan, a diehard Cowboys fan, was convinced this was their year, and while I wasn't a Cowboys enthusiast, I joined in to keep the conversation lively. On the other side of the table, Holly, Helen, and Diane discussed fashion until the band started up. Diane and Holly immediately jumped to their feet, dragging each other to the dance floor. Before heading off, Holly handed me her half-finished beer. "I'm done with this," she said with a wink. I shrugged and returned to Michael and Ethan, who had moved on to a spirited discussion about the Patriots' decline, which Michael seemed particularly eager to celebrate. As the music shifted to a slow song, Holly appeared out of nowhere and pulled me onto the dance floor. Without a word, she slipped into my arms, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Despite my usual clumsiness, Holly anticipated my every move, making it feel effortless. When the song ended, I returned to the table, but not without noticing Michael and Ethan exchanging glances. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, nodding toward Holly, who was back on the floor with Diane. "What do you mean?" I replied. Michael smirked. "Holly doesn't slow dance. She hasn't, not once in the 7 months she's been here. Now it's 2 weeks in a row with you." I shrugged. "I have no idea. I'm not looking for anything right now. I'm still technically married." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You planning to change that?" "I'd consider it if we could avoid fighting over every cent," I said cautiously, not wanting to reveal too much. I'm not eager to line lawyers' pockets. Helen, who had just returned to the table, chimed in. "But don't you want to find someone new? Get married again?" I looked at her for a moment. She averted her eyes as if realizing the weight of her question. "Helen, let me save you the trouble. Don't tell me it was a mistake, that you love your husband, or that you've decided to stop. A good wife wouldn't have started in the first place." The tension was palpable. Ethan seemed uneasy, and Michael, ever the bachelor, looked contemplative. Thankfully, the band returned, and Diane and Holly rejoined the table. Holly handed me another half-finished beer. "Finish this for me?" she said with a sly smile. "Why don't you just drink it?" I asked, holding up the bottle. She winked. "Because I'm done with that one." The conversation shifted to the upcoming company picnic, and Holly and Diane pressed the group for stories about previous events. Ethan stayed quiet when the tales veered toward married co-workers caught sneaking around, though he cracked a smile at a particularly scandalous story involving the VP's wife. The night followed a pattern. Holly danced to every fast song but reserved slow ones for me. If I refused, she danced with Diane, but always returned to sit quietly until the music changed. By 9:30, I decided I'd had enough. "Sorry, folks," I said to the group, "but it's getting crowded. I'm heading out." I tipped the waitress generously for dealing with Ethan and Michael's growing drunkenness and turned to leave, only to find Holly standing by the door. "You're coming with me?" she said as we stepped into the cool night air. Smirking, I replied, "And I'm letting you in my car." She laughed. "Because I'm a defenseless little girl who needs protection, of course." I chuckled as we walked to the car. After opening the passenger door for her, she kissed me on the cheek and sighed. "I could get used to this." "Holly, I began, but she cut me off. "Let me guess. You're too old. Not handsome enough, not rich enough, still married, and probably not a good dancer." I started the car, searching for a response. Finally, I muttered, "You forgot bad dancer." Holly burst out laughing, unbuckling her seatbelt to kiss my cheek again. "Oh, so you still want to argue?" she teased. "I just wish there wasn't anything to argue about," I admitted. "But you're not wrong about any of it," Holly smiled. "You're 8 years older. That's nothing. I don't need a Brad Pitt, just someone I trust. And money? Happiness is far richer than wealth. As for your marriage, you'll sort it out, and at least I know you'll keep the fire alive." I sighed, her words disarming me yet again. "You're a gem, Holly. Far too good for me," I murmured as I drove her to her apartment. When we arrived, Holly sat, smiling at me expectantly. Realizing she was waiting, I got out with a sigh to open her door. Before I could reach it, I heard my driver's side door slam. Holly stood, dangling my keys before slipping them down her blouse with a giggle. "Holly!" I shouted as she bolted toward her apartment. Chasing her was futile. Her athleticism left me in the dust. By the time I reached her door, it was open, her laughter echoing from the dark interior. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside, searching for her. As I stood in the hallway, lost in thought, I turned at the sound of the door closing. Holly was standing there, dressed only in silk lingerie, exuding a confidence that was impossible to ignore. She walked toward me with deliberate grace, wrapping her arms around my neck and making it clear that her intentions were far more than casual. The sight was both alluring and overwhelming, stirring a war within me as I fought to maintain control. The tension was unbearable as I struggled against my own desire. Despite my resolve, I found myself admitting something I had meant to keep to myself, that my divorce would be final in 28 days. Holly's reaction was immediate, her excitement uncontainable as she clung to me, filled with hope and joy. Her questions about the timing and whether my decision had been influenced by her came rapid fire, but I explained the truth. Janelle, my estranged wife, had unexpectedly resurfaced days earlier. After consulting a lawyer, we had agreed to a divorce due to irreconcilable differences and the advice of a counselor Janelle had spoken to long ago. Holly processed my explanation quickly, her thoughts racing ahead. She openly began planning for a future that I wasn't yet ready to commit to, declaring a timeline for us to move forward. Her insistence that I was now hers left no room for subtlety, but I firmly reminded her of my stance. Regardless of the circumstances surrounding my failed marriage, I would not cross a line before the divorce was final. The refusal hit Holly hard, and tears welled in her eyes as she admitted her fears. She had tried to rush things, desperate to claim me before anyone else had the chance. Her vulnerability softened the moment, and as she sat down across from me, she began to open up about the deeper reasons behind her feelings. Holly shared her upbringing in a small Nebraska town, where her father, a mechanic, had been the heart of the family. He was a hardworking, respected man who loved his children deeply, raising Holly and her 6 siblings with care and devotion. Her mother, however, had been different, more interested in chasing big city dreams than being present for the family. Though she looked after the children, most of her energy went into maintaining her appearance and social aspirations. Holly recounted how, by the time she was 6, her mother had emotionally checked out. The family's life unraveled when Holly was on the brink of high school. Her father had returned early from a job, only to find her mother with another man, a flashy lawyer from Dallas. The fallout was devastating. Her mother initiated divorce proceedings almost immediately and left the family, choosing her new life over her children. Holly and her siblings remained with their father, who stayed steadfast and committed to them despite his heartbreak. As Holly spoke, her voice carried a mix of admiration and pain. Her father's unwavering dedication had shaped her expectations of love and loyalty, and she saw in me echoes of the man she respected most. Her feelings were rooted not just in attraction, but in a deep-seated belief that I embodied the qualities she had always valued. It was a lot to take in, her sincerity making her intentions clearer than ever. Hearing Holly's story left me conflicted. Her trust in me, shaped by her past, was humbling. Yet the weight of her expectations and the scars of my own failed marriage kept me guarded, uncertain of whether I could live up to her vision, or if I should even try. Holly's voice trembled as she recounted the tragic fate of her father. After her mother's betrayal, he devoted himself entirely to his children, ensuring each of them graduated and saving what he could for their future education. 7 years later, after her youngest brother finished high school, he ended his life in the bedroom he hadn't entered since her mother left. Holly's heartbreak was evident as she explained how this loss shaped her views on love and loyalty. She vowed never to repeat her mother's mistakes, determined to find a partner she could truly trust. Despite her deep conviction, I tried to distance myself, insisting she barely knew me. But Holly countered with what she had gleaned from the workplace gossip, stories that painted me as a loyal, one-woman man. She saw me as exactly what she needed, even as I resisted. Overwhelmed, I told her I needed time to process everything. Holly, undeterred, guided me toward her bedroom, insisting that I could at least sleep beside her and decide in the morning. Her persistence, paired with her disarming vulnerability, left me unable to argue. Reluctantly, I stripped down to my underwear and lay on her bed. She climbed in after me, settling comfortably into my arms. Despite my reservations, I found myself holding her close, her warmth and presence both comforting and unsettling. The next morning, I woke to find Holly staring at me with a quiet intensity. In that moment, something inside me shifted. Her unwavering devotion and the honesty in her eyes shattered the final barrier I had been clinging to. I whispered my surrender and asked her to marry me. Holly's reaction was immediate and emotional. Tears streamed down her face as she clung to me, overwhelmed by joy and relief. When she finally composed herself, she kissed me with a fervor that spoke of the depth of her feelings. Her simple yes was all I needed. Afterward, as I began dressing, Holly stayed in bed, already planning our future. She proposed a simple courthouse wedding, followed by her moving in with me. When I asked about a larger ceremony, she dismissed the idea, preferring an intimate vow exchange between just the two of us. Any grand celebration, she said, could wait for a vow renewal on our first anniversary. Her disdain for her mother's legacy of superficiality was palpable, as was her fierce commitment to building a life with me. Holly's passion was both endearing and overwhelming. She saw our marriage as a deeply personal bond, a promise of mutual love, loyalty, and partnership. Her humorous boldness returned as she teased me about the intimacy she planned to share, leaving me both laughing and exasperated. When I jokingly pushed her boundaries, she playfully escalated the situation, reminding me just how determined she could be. Eventually, I managed to gather my things and head for the door, Holly's laughter and warmth following me. She hugged me before I left, her parting words filled with anticipation. She reminded me to start preparing for our life together, her optimism and confidence a stark contrast to the uncertainty I had felt just days before. For better or worse, Holly had pulled me into her world, and I found myself no longer wanting to resist. As I finally wrestled my shoe into place and dashed out the door, Holly's laughter echoed behind me, lightening my steps as I made my way to the car. Driving home, I was a mix of emotions. Just a week earlier, I was a man hiding from a broken marriage and an uncertain future. Now, I was in the middle of a fast-track divorce and engaged to a vibrant, confident woman who had completely upended my life. Back home, I showered and started tidying up, but my good mood was interrupted by a phone call. Janelle was on the other end, her voice unsettlingly cheerful. She informed me that she had sold or packed her belongings and found an apartment near mine. She suggested I take her around town next Saturday, a proposition that caught me off guard. Despite my hesitation, I agreed, realizing that avoiding her wasn't an option. By the time we hung up, the conversation had dampened my spirits. To regain some positivity, I decided to visit a jeweler and picked out a ring that felt right for Holly. Monday morning, I left the jewelry box on Holly's chair at work and went to my office, bracing for her reaction. Meanwhile, I made some important calls, starting with Lawrence, our VP. After hearing my request for 2 weeks off, he was initially frustrated, but softened when I explained the reason: a honeymoon. He even extended the time off, clearly thrilled by the news, and hinted that I should expect another call. That call came soon after, from Vigo, the company's CEO and an old friend. Vigo didn't mince words, diving straight into the rumors about my impending marriage. He teased me about Holly, referring to her as the cheerleader accountant, and demanded to know how I'd managed to win her over when she had a reputation for rejecting advances. I admitted she had pursued me and that I had finally surrendered. Vigo, always one to mix personal and professional conversations, quickly shifted gears. He revealed plans to promote Lawrence to Senior VP of Product Development and elevate me to VP of Marketing. The news left me stunned, especially when he casually added that Holly might be assigned to my team to handle finances. His laughter at my objections about office gossip and propriety only underscored his confidence in his decision. The day took another unexpected turn when Holly arrived at work and found the ring. Just minutes later, she burst into my office, her joy overflowing as she hugged me tightly and showed off the diamond and sapphire ring to everyone nearby. Even my secretary, Sally, congratulated us enthusiastically, quickly spreading the news across the office. By mid-morning, nearly every coworker had stopped by with their best wishes. Michael, ever the joker, handed me a tin of cash from a workplace pool, betting on who would land a date with Holly first. Despite my protests that we hadn't officially dated, he refused to take it back, and I decided to add the money to the honeymoon fund. Amid the whirlwind of work and congratulations, Holly began bringing lunch to my office. We spent those moments sharing stories about our childhoods, with her warmth and patience easing my lingering doubts. The flirtation that had once defined her approach softened into gentle affection. When I asked about the change, she explained with a laugh that she wanted to save the intimacy for our wedding night, ensuring it would be special. Her newfound restraint only deepened my admiration for her, though it left me apprehensive about the upcoming Saturday with Janelle. When I shared Janelle's plans, Holly simply smiled and promised to call after the meeting, her calm reassurance a reminder of the trust and love she placed in me. Holly and Janelle were bound to cross paths that evening. Word of my engagement had spread quickly through the office, and by 5 p.m., the usual crowd from work swept into my office, dragging me along to Charlie's for a celebratory round of drinks. At our usual lively table, Holly leaned comfortably against my shoulder as we laughed and talked, until Janelle walked in. Michael was the first to notice, commenting on her striking appearance as she approached. I froze, realizing who it was just as she reached us. Holly started to pull away, but I held her hand firmly, resting it on my lap. Janelle greeted me warmly, mentioning her recent move and upcoming job interviews. Her tone was light, but her eyes flicked to Holly, her suspicion clear. I introduced her to the group, explaining who was seated at the table. When her gaze lingered on Holly, Janelle's voice turned sharp, questioning her role in my life. I met her inquiry head-on, holding Holly's hand as I clarified that Holly was my fiancée and that Janelle's hopes of reconciliation were too late. Both women seemed momentarily stunned, but Holly quickly whispered her gratitude in my ear, her love unmistakable. Janelle sat down, visibly deflated, but continued the conversation, brushing off her infidelity as a tiny mistake. Michael, however, wasn't having it. He spoke bluntly about the damage infidelity causes, recounting how Helen's recent escapades had led her husband Dean to file for divorce. The fallout was brutal, with Dean leaving Helen stranded after discovering her past indiscretions. Michael's story left Janelle visibly shaken, though she admitted she admired my honesty and hoped Holly appreciated me. Holly, ever composed, reached out to Janelle, promising to do her best to make me happy. The warmth in Holly's words stood in stark contrast to the tension between Janelle and me. Before I could respond, Janelle admitted she had hoped to use our upcoming Saturday outing to rekindle our relationship. Holly quickly stepped in with a solution, turning the day into a group outing. She suggested a double date to a blues festival, followed by dinner at a local restaurant, pairing Janelle with Michael. Janelle hesitated, confused by this suggestion, especially after Holly revealed we had never been on a traditional date despite our engagement. The playful banter that followed between Janelle and Holly softened the mood, and Janelle eventually agreed, introducing herself to Michael with charming directness. She laid her cards on the table, stating her current circumstances and her willingness to see where things might lead after her divorce. Michael, caught off guard but amused, agreed to the plan. Holly giggled as the two women found a surprising camaraderie. While I remained conflicted about Janelle's presence and her lingering feelings, I couldn't deny the sense of closure slowly settling over the situation. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, but for the first time, it felt like everyone was beginning to find their place in the unfolding story. The first time Janelle and I met in college, she approached me boldly, announcing that we'd be testing our compatibility that night. That audacious start led to 2 years as lovers and a 7-year marriage. Now, years later, Michael hesitated, glancing at me for approval after Janelle's unexpected invitation. With a smirk, I gave him a subtle nod. Blushing, he finally agreed, prompting Janelle to squeal in delight, leap into his lap, and kiss him. Moments later, a slow song began, and we were all on the dance floor, me with Holly, and Michael with his Saturday date. Sometimes, what you expect to be awkward turns out better than you imagined. That Saturday, Holly and Michael arrived at my apartment just as Janelle did. After a brief discussion, we all piled into my car and headed to a blues festival. The sprawling open-air event had multiple stages and craft booths. Agreeing to regroup by the car at 4 p.m., we split into pairs to explore. To my surprise, Janelle and Holly bonded quickly, ganging up on Michael and me with playful teasing. Meanwhile, Janelle and I settled back into the easy camaraderie that had once been the foundation of our marriage. By mid-afternoon, I noticed Janelle holding hands with Michael as we listened to a band. From that moment on, she acted like a smitten schoolgirl, while Michael seemed equally enchanted. When the women slipped away to freshen up, Michael confided his growing feelings for Janelle. He admitted he was already imagining a future with her and asked if I'd have any objections. I told him I cared deeply for Janelle, but encouraged him to love her and treat her well. Michael nodded, clearly determined, just as the women returned, their curiosity about our conversation met with a teasing deflection. Dinner that evening was a blur of good food and quiet connections. Holly and I spent most of the meal gazing into each other's eyes, while Janelle and Michael did the same. The atmosphere was so sweet that even the waiter seemed affected by the saccharine energy at the table. By the time we returned to my apartment, Michael and Janelle exchanged numbers in a passionate kiss before heading off separately. Holly joined me upstairs, ostensibly to see the apartment, though it was clear she planned to spend the night. She had brought a t-shirt to wear to bed, but made a show of slowly undressing, nearly breaking our resolve to wait for our wedding night. As I held her in my arms, I realized how much she had become the center of my world. The following Monday brought a surprise. An envelope on my desk containing plane tickets to the Bahamas and a 2-week stay at a luxury resort. The departure date was set for the evening of our wedding. Attached was a note from Vigo simply stating, "Have fun." Holly's scream of joy when I showed her the tickets reverberated through the office, and Vigo's amused response on the phone confirmed it was his gift to his favorite VP. The The week turned hectic with new responsibilities and meetings. Vigo and Lawrence announced sweeping changes to the company's structure, which meant I was inundated with reviewing managers and preparing for my expanded role. Holly, too, was busy, and our moments together were limited to quick hugs and kisses during elevator rides. By Friday, we were both too exhausted to join the usual gathering at Charlie's, and instead spent the evening at my apartment. Holly's choice of attire, a thong, pushed the boundaries of restraint, but she simply laughed off my warnings about tempting fate, insisting we were already married in her heart. Saturday's company picnic was full of surprises. Holly and I were warmly welcomed as an official couple, but the bigger shock came when Janelle arrived on Michael's arm, sporting her own engagement ring. She excitedly shared how she and Michael had spent the previous weekend discovering shared passions for dance and music. Their engagement would be longer than ours, but Janelle declared that Michael wanted me as his best man, while Holly would stand as her maid of honor. The following week proved relentless. Holly's schedule was packed with audits and meetings, leaving me to juggle my own demanding workload. Despite her loving voicemails, we barely crossed paths, which only heightened my anticipation for the weekend. By Friday, Michael and Ethan dragged me out for what they dubbed my last night of freedom. They insisted I forget my responsibilities for a night and joined a group of coworkers at a steakhouse. There, they refused to let me pay or lift a finger. Michael sat on my right, Dean on my left. During a rare, quiet moment, Dean leaned in to whisper something unexpected, catching me completely off guard. The evening began with an unexpected warning from Dean, who quietly informed me that Ethan wasn't taking Holly's engagement to me well. He suspected Ethan might try to stir trouble, even cautioning me about my drinks. I brushed it off with a laugh, reminding Dean that I rarely drank more than a single beer. Still, his concern lingered. Michael soon stood to address the group, tapping his glass for attention. He launched into a humorous toast about my impending sacrifice to matrimony, urging the group to celebrate my final moments of bachelorhood. The room erupted in cheers, and I stood briefly to thank everyone for their support and friendship, asking them to celebrate my happiness rather than mourn my departure from bachelorhood. Another round of cheers followed, just as our steak dinners arrived. During the meal, I caught Ethan dropping something into my beer. Without drawing attention, I nudged the tampered glass toward Dean and kept it untouched for the rest of the dinner. Michael, ever watchful, subtly switched another beer Ethan tried to hand me with an unopened one from the floor. "Holly would never forgive me," he whispered, ensuring my safety. As the evening progressed, Ethan organized the group to relocate to a nearby Marriott, where a small banquet hall awaited. Drinks flowed freely, but the focus soon shifted to a table laden with gifts for me. Michael took the lead, swapping my drink once more before presenting the boxes. The first box I opened contained a riding crop, prompting roars of laughter as Michael quipped about showing the matriarchy who gets to do the riding. The second revealed a paddle embroidered with the boss, which Dean jokingly suggested could keep the misses in line. The third box was smaller and contained a nameplate, Ryan Bennett, VP of Marketing. The applause and cheers following this gift marked a moment of sincerity amidst the humor. The next box, a roll of duct tape, left everyone puzzled until Michael joked about its many uses. Seizing the moment, I tore off a piece and slapped it over Michael's mouth, declaring it a great conversation stopper. The room exploded with laughter as Michael peeled it off, laughing just as hard as the rest of us. Finally, I reached the last box, which Michael had warned was special. Opening it carefully, I found a delicate baby blue negligee that perfectly matched Holly's eyes. The room collectively inhaled as I held it up, stunned by its elegance and intimacy. Michael leaned in to explain it had been custom ordered in Holly's size, with Janelle's help, as a wedding night gift, a keepsake to celebrate the beginning of our life together. The gesture was unexpectedly thoughtful, and for a moment the boisterous group quieted, sensing the significance of the gift. The night, filled with camaraderie and laughter, ended on a note of genuine warmth. The blend of humor, friendship, and subtle emotional moments underscored the bond shared among the group and the life-changing milestone I was about to embrace. As I gazed at the delicate negligee, a flood of emotion overcame me. The thought of Holly wearing it and curling into my arms stirred a deep sense of gratitude. Shaking hands with Michael and Dean, I expressed my appreciation before turning to the rest of the group, the mood briefly reflective. Then Ethan shattered the quiet by flinging open the door and ushering in 3 women dressed in provocative nurse costumes. "Let's show Ryan what he'll be missing," Ethan shouted as loud techno music blared from a boombox. The women began dancing provocatively, removing clothing in a display that was less playful and more overtly sleazy. One of them approached me, her hand reaching toward my belt. I brushed her off, grabbing a picture of Holly that Michael had placed on my lap as a reminder. Dean had slipped away and Michael moved to sit beside me, his gaze narrowing on Ethan, who was watching us with barely concealed animosity. Michael leaned in and hissed, "He sedated your beer. Bet he was planning to snap pictures of you with these girls for Holly to see." Ethan's plan clicked into place as the dancer continued to press. I held up Holly's picture, telling her she was lovely, but not worth the risk of losing the woman I loved. She hesitated, her confusion growing as she noticed the chaos around the room. The other two women were engaged in explicit acts with some of the men, the scene devolving into an unseemly spectacle. The dancer's expression darkened as she noticed Ethan holding a camera. Her anger flared. "He's disgusting," she spat. Michael explained how Holly had rejected Ethan's advances, wanting a man she could trust. She looked at me, her tone softening. "You really love her?" she asked. I nodded, expressing how much Holly meant to me, even in such a short time. Michael laughed and stood, helping me up. "Time to get this groom-to-be out of here." The woman, now fully dressed in her nurse robe, offered to carry my gifts. She introduced herself as Maureen, explaining that she wasn't close to the others and had only taken the job for financial reasons. Escorting us out of the banquet hall, she expressed her disillusionment with men, but noted that Michael and I were exceptions. At the elevator, Maureen revealed a bit of her past, how abusive relationships had driven her to her current life. Still, she seemed genuinely impressed by our integrity. As we reached the room Michael had arranged for me, he hesitated, explaining that her presence might look inappropriate. Maureen chuckled. "Don't worry, I'll head home, change into something formal, and see you at the wedding. I'd like to meet the woman lucky enough to have you." Michael handed her a key card to a nearby room for the night, his awkward demeanor bringing a laugh from Maureen. She promised to return properly dressed for the wedding before leaving us. Inside the simple room with two twin beds, Michael explained that the setup had been a contingency plan in case he needed to stay. He called Janelle to let her know, leaving me to reflect on the evening. Despite Ethan's underhanded ploy, I felt a renewed sense of clarity about Holly and the life awaiting us. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. The next morning, I awoke with faint memories of a vivid dream where Holly and I were entwined in each other's arms. Michael was already up, adjusting his tuxedo and teasing me as I prepared for the wedding. He had thoughtfully laid out my own tuxedo, and breakfast had been ordered via room service. Once we stepped out of the room, we would head straight to the ceremony. When I asked where the wedding was, Michael merely grinned without answering. As we took the elevator to the lobby, Maureen and Helen joined us. Helen explained that Janelle had asked her to make sure Maureen arrived safely. Outside, a limo waited, and Michael announced it would take us to the venue. I expected a courthouse, but was surprised when the limo exited the freeway and drove to a picturesque state park. There, we pulled up to a beautifully adorned canopy, surrounded by friends, co-workers, and a smiling Vigo. "I couldn't let you get married in a courthouse," Vigo said, hugging me as I tried to protest the extravagance. Michael hurried me to the altar, and the strains of "Here Comes the Bride" began to play. When I instinctively turned to look, Michael stopped me. "Trust me, it's worth the wait," he whispered. I stood still, listening to the music and wondering how much effort Vigo had poured into this day. Movement from the corner of my eye caught my attention, and I turned to see Holly. The sight left me breathless. She wore a sheath of white that clung perfectly to her curves while flowing gracefully with every step. Sleeveless with lace ribbons adorning her arms, the gown complemented the bouquet of red roses in her hands. Her intricately braided hair sparkled with white feathers and blue beads, while her understated makeup radiated her natural beauty. She didn't wear a veil, and her love and joy shone brilliantly in the morning light. I gasped, only snapping out of my trance when Michael nudged me repeatedly. Turning back to the minister, I barely registered the ceremony, except for 2 moments, my clear "I do," and Holly's heartfelt response, "With all my heart, I do." When the minister declared us husband and wife, Holly threw her arms around me for our first kiss as a married couple. We left to the applause of our guests and climbed into the waiting limo. Vigo, standing nearby, offered a final hug and wished us well, saying, "The limo will take you to the airport. Everything's ready for your honeymoon. Come back safe." Words failed to capture our wedding night or the 2 weeks that followed. Holly found the blue negligee from my bachelor party and wore it to bed. Though I had imagined her in it countless times, the reality surpassed every fantasy. Crawling toward me on the bed, she trembled with both excitement and nervousness. What followed was a night of passion and love that exceeded anything I'd ever dreamed. The honeymoon became a weekend-long celebration in our suite before we finally ventured out. Vigo had arranged a variety of activities, and we spent our days sailing, swimming, hiking, and exploring the island. By the end of the trip, Holly was not just my wife, but my soulmate, inseparable from my life. Returning home, we found that Michael and Janelle had packed up our apartments and moved everything into our new home. A cheerful note on the kitchen table welcomed us back, but the two had made themselves scarce to give us privacy. That first night back became our first night in the new house, where every corner felt like it belonged to us. Life soon settled into a joyful rhythm. Work was fulfilling, home life with Holly was blissful, and every day felt like a new adventure. Together, we found that the best parts of our lives had only just begun. Michael and Janelle planned their December wedding and surprised us by buying a house just a few doors away. They lived together openly and happily, quickly becoming our closest friends. It was rare for a weekend to pass without at least one shared evening, whether at the bar or enjoying dinner at one of our homes. Before their wedding, two events stood out as milestones in this transformative time. The first happened on a brisk November Saturday when Holly managed to get tickets to her alma mater's rivalry game. Excited, she dragged me along. We spent the morning strolling the campus, visiting her old apartment complex, and reminiscing about her college days before heading to the stadium. The game itself was uneventful. Her team dominated early and coasted to an easy win. At halftime, Holly insisted we head closer to the field where she waved down a cheerleader. The young woman, Megan, ran over with a bright smile. The two greeted each other warmly, exchanging updates. Holly laughed when Megan joked that she could still fit into a cheerleading uniform. Holly's response left me stunned. She announced she wouldn't fit into one for much longer. Holding out her hand, Holly declared she was not only married, but also pregnant. I turned her to face me, and the truth shone in her glowing eyes. Overwhelmed, I kissed her deeply and asked why she hadn't told me. She confessed she'd only confirmed the news the day before and wanted it to be a surprise. Megan joined in the celebration, gushing over Holly's happiness and teasing her about her whirlwind romance and quick pregnancy, likely conceived on our wedding night. I stood speechless, basking in the joy of knowing I was going to be a father. The second event, far less joyful, unfolded weeks later during our usual Friday gathering at Charlie's. Maureen had become a regular part of our group, often teasing Michael and me about our devotion to our wives. That night, Helen seemed down, mentioning that Dean had grown distant. Fighting the flu, she decided to leave early, and Holly and Maureen offered to drive her home. Michael, Janelle, and I followed later, only to find Helen in our living room, devastated. Holly and Maureen explained what had happened. Arriving at Helen's house, they had caught Dean in the act, sleeping with one of the dancers from my bachelor party. Helen had collapsed in shock, and Holly and Maureen brought her to our home. The next day, Michael and I helped Helen pack her belongings and leave Dean for good. She stayed with us for a week before moving in with Maureen, who had become one of her closest friends. 30 years have passed since that whirlwind year. Holly and I are now retired, still living in the same home where we started our life together. Michael and Janelle remain down the street, and weekends are often filled with shared meals or adventures. Helen and Maureen, who bought a house nearby, often join us, their companionship as strong as ever. Our 3 children have grown and built successful lives of their own. Victor, named after Holly's father, works with NASA on solar research and visits monthly with his wife and 2 sons. Our twin daughters, Chloe and Lila, mirror their mother's beauty and intelligence. Both pursued engineering and are thriving in the private sector, though they jokingly insist they're waiting for men as good as their father. Holly always laughs, saying they might be searching for a while. Holly and I still share a deep and passionate bond. She teases me for how I blush at her compliments, and I remind her that she puts me on too high a pedestal. Her response is always the same, leading me to the bedroom to remind me just how much she loves me. Looking back, I know I've lived a truly blessed life. The pain Janelle once caused feels like a distant memory, though it ultimately led me to Holly. Last week, as Holly and I watched Michael and Janelle embrace on our patio during a barbecue, Janelle joked, "It's not what you think." I smiled, thinking of how those words once tore my world apart, but ultimately brought me to Holly. Gently hugging Janelle, I whispered, "You don't know what I think."